Hello and welcome to our Education for All video series, where we'll be talking to a range of wonderful people about their experiences. Education for All is a campaign to help break down the accessible barriers within the education system and to ensure that everyone has a future that they deserve. You can find all of our information and campaign pack at www.horlicks.com. Today we're joined by Piero Tintori. Piero is the CEO of Terminalfour and Better Examinations. Terminalfour is a wonderful enterprise content management system that has powered many universities here in the UK and across the globe. Better Examinations is a comprehensive end-to-end exam management and e-assessment platform, helping to make the examination process less stressful and more accessible to everyone. Piero, welcome.
James, great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Would you like to start today by giving everyone a bit of an introduction about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I suppose originally I had a technical background, but got into sort of web development back in the early 2000s, which just seems like so long ago. But I was definitely sort of like from a more technical angle. But I suppose very quickly we got into initially helping organizations build and manage all of their web infrastructure and delivering services online, which from that we built out our web content management system and digital experience platform, Terminalfour, and as you said, we work with about 250 universities and colleges around the world. That's our main area that we specialize in. We also have some clients in government as well, and really, I suppose we got very close to helping them deliver good services online and really improve the experience generally. And as we started working with more and more universities and colleges, what we started to see was there's actually more areas through digital transformation where we could make a big difference. And one of the big areas there that we've been really focusing on for the last 2 or 3 years has been we saw a real gap in the whole online assessment model, which sort of it touches on accessibility, but actually it touches on of everybody, because if you think about it, when you do exams, it's often handwritten for hours, and even if you're fully able to write with a pen, your hand is sore. So we tried, that's even at the basic level, trying to build a platform that really helps people's lives, uh, on a day-to-day basis when they're within a university or college.
Brilliant. So, as you say, it's wonderful you've worked with so many different universities and government areas. How do you feel digital accessibility, how crucial is this in the education sector?
I think it's probably one of the areas, as well as say government services. I think within education primarily, it's probably one of the most important, because ultimately, if there's a blocker to somebody following their dreams and studying what they want to study, and then obviously education is a great leveler in society and really helps people generally. If they can't engage in education at the same level of everybody else, it has a massive impact. And I just think it's it's really, it's one of the areas I feel that like it really stops people from being um, part of society and being able to contribute to society and to being able to help others. And it can be in simple things, it's not just, originally people were thinking about accessibility as the ramps into buildings and accessible buildings and physical buildings, but it's way further back than that. You're talking about people, say, researching a university or college to go to, and if they can't find and do their research as to where they want to study, they're 2 or 3 years before they even get to the campus. They can be set on the wrong path. And I just think it's so important these days. Now, luckily, a lot of universities are really putting a huge amount of effort into it. But I can also see it from a university's point of view. There's a huge amount of work to be done to really improve accessibility across the sector.
Do you see many differences between maybe the UK and the US market when it comes to digital accessibility?
I think I think that there's different. I think generally the people we work with, which would be people who would be either from a sort of a um, digital experience point of view, student recruitment, IT, even. I think certainly over the last 5, 10 years, like accessibility is a huge priority. And I think that's generally in every country around the world. We work in, I think it's like 11 different countries. We work with different universities. And certainly in I would say almost all those countries, it's a top priority, at least by the people who run these projects. I think there's two challenges. I think one is that well, there's two interlinked challenges. One is the funding to support building accessible services and content and channels and even the educational system being accessible to for everybody. Um, the funding behind that does not match up with what is needed. The problem, so what's happened is in some countries, some of the legal cases around accessibility have been one of the motivating factors around different organizations getting more funding than others. So in the US, you're probably familiar, James, with the different agencies. Some of the agencies, there's people bringing out lawsuits against them for having inaccessible services or this and that. And often that can actually, whether that's done at a federal government level or whether it's done in a personal capacity, it does tend to, fortunately and unfortunately, unlock budget to get these things sorted out. In other countries, it tends to be more people focusing on that this is the right thing to do. So I think that's the one thing that's different as to what's accelerating the investment in this. But I would say generally the investment is not there. When you're running a big university and you want to make it accessible to everybody, it's not just your website content, it's not just your physical buildings, it's like your lectures, it's your it's the um, say the lecture recording, the learning management systems, the course material. You bring in, you maybe acquire some sort of like I saw this fantastic tool for doing simulations for those people, for people studying medicine, and it's all like 3D modeling, and it's really impressive stuff. But like on the other side of my head, it was going. Because I think on one side it's like that's really impressive, but on the other side, I was like, well, how's that going to work for people maybe who have particular needs? So I think the difference is, I think the people we work with all know it's important, but unlocking the budget is inconsistent relative to the rhetoric that's being that's the messaging from an organization is often different to the commitment financially. But you know what? There's not many universities around that have so much money that they certainly public universities that they can just throw everything at everything. So in practice, I think it is a matter of trying to get the funding model right, because it's something that needs to be uh, good quality, accessible information, content, services needs to be delivered, right? But it needs to be consistent as to how that's funded. I think across every country. I think.
Mm. Being having a funding side of things is always been a problem through all of these talks. We've definitely seen that being highlighted, that funding is a massive problem. Do you find that because they've not thought about this at an early stage, so before maybe Terminal4 come in or their design agency come in, because they're having to retrofit it, do you find that that is becoming more and more expensive because of that reason, because of the lack of thinking at the start?
I know. You know what? I think these days, with a lot of sort of web and digital projects, the people who are involved know it's important, right? So whether you're working with whatever design company you're working with, even companies like ourselves, we know what we're talking about. We have people who are, that they understand all of this, and I think we would definitely make sure that as projects go through the quality assurance process, um, there's checks around accessibility, there's checks around other things as well. But I think it's, a well-run organization such as our own or web development agencies, they'd really have to be out of touch with reality to not know that this is super important. And often if there is a gap, the customer is more educated as well as to what to look for, even if it's a very simplistic way of testing stuff. I think where the issue actually is sort of like ongoing sustainability of particularly content. That it's very simple to create inaccessible content using tools that everybody uses on a day-to-day basis. I was I was only today looking at a small timetable for uh, a sports club within a university and on social media, and they took a screenshot of the table of the different games, right? So it's so easy for everybody. One of the things that we do at the university is we create the governance structure for people to manage their content throughout a university in a structured way. There isn't the resources to check every piece of content, and nor should it be someone's responsibility to check it. But there's also a training and an overhead of actually publishing accessible content. And if people are under time pressure,
Mm.
what will they do is, you know, luckily with our tool, for example, that you can, at least on the core websites, you can sort of, any website run through our platform, you can put in workflows and checks to make sure that somebody isn't doing something silly. But a simple example is it's so easy just to go into, you know, take a screenshot of a few cells in Excel, literally a screenshot, paste it into like, you know, Facebook or Twitter or something like that, and it's there, right? And it's totally inaccessible and useless. So you can have all these governance structures and rules, but it's just so easy to publish inaccessible content. And if people are under time pressure, it just never gets fixed, it never
Mhm.
gets improved. So I think that's the biggest challenge. It's not the big project or the big go live or even the content that's managed by an educated team of people, whether that's the central team, but it's the central team plus maybe one or two people out across an organization. It's all the things around an organization that can suddenly make somebody's life a real pain because they can't find out where something is or when something is, or, it just makes it very, very difficult. So that's my view on it, I think.
I always hate to see a PDF that has been kind of copied and pasted from or screenshotted from somewhere else. And it's the
Yeah,
same thing, having that content governance is vital. And there are many tools that do the automated searching, but like you say, you need to get that problem at the start, making sure your content governance is right and training staff, employees, anyone that's adding content is so
yeah.
vital to have a good structure in that to make
Yeah,
sure
I
it doesn't
think it
go
is.
out.
I think the governance piece around it, I think the piece that's so important about governance is that I think it's better to say that we're not going to publish something if it's not accessible. So I think you can roll out training, but what we're seeing is that even teams that have like very successful training programs, unless you connect with everybody so that they're empathizing with the challenges of people who are, maybe using screen readers or using other assistive technologies, that's the thing. You have to unlock the empathy because otherwise they're just going to, time and busyness is just going to literally push, oh, I need to get that out. I get that done. I need to get the timetable for this out. I'll just quickly put that little image of that spreadsheet. Where if you'd actually put up the Excel document, you probably would be more accessible than just taking the screenshot of it. So I think there's this time, quality, and training element to it, and they sort of have to match up. That you're better off if someone's too busy to do it properly, you're probably better off not doing it at all, I would
Mm-hmm.
think.
No, I think that's
It
a
is a
valid point.
tricky one. It's very, very. I mean, these, James, you know this. It's the last 20 years, 15 years. These have all been hot topics, and yet some of the same challenges that are still now. It's easier and there's better tools and everything, but some of these challenges have been going around for probably 15 years.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yeah,
Uh, one other area that we've seen, and we hate coming back to this, but the pandemic I think showed us quite a lot about the digital shift. Universities relied on in-person open days as a best example. They wanted to
yeah.
meet people, show them around the university. Obviously, during the pandemic, that changed. No, we couldn't do that. Everything went online. Did you find that, or did you see any really good examples of online open days, or did you did you see how people were being more inclusive with this type of welcome?
Yeah, on the two fronts, both parts of our business, became really important. Definitely, the pandemic made digital genuinely the number one channel for people get to know a university or a college. Always it was the prospectus or the open day, and then the website. It was certainly, I'm saying this is not necessarily reality, but it was the perception by senior managers within universities and colleges that there was this perception that we need to get them here and then they'll really understand us. But I think now people are, certainly with our own research, what that we're seeing is that students are ruling out universities and colleges way earlier in the process before even leaving their house to have a look. They're having a look at the online channels. They're talking to friends. It's all about doing their own research, and that suddenly became really important, certainly during the pandemic, because there weren't any other options. We definitely did see some really good online tours and things like that, but in practice, the biggest thing was the overall web experience played a really a big part in people choosing where to go. That certainly something that we saw in our own research was that students were saying that if it was a poor website experience, forget about an online tour or forget about or whatever. If it was a poor experience, and I mean this not just finding information about what I'm interested in, but but also um, interacting with the organization. If that was a poor experience, I think there was some statistic of like 70% would rule out a university unless they had a really strong affiliation to that university already. And another 10% would not see it in a positive way and would sort of, try and try and find information in other ways. But they were 70, 80% of people making a judgment just through their experience digitally. So that definitely changed. Now, what happened in the pandemic was senior leadership spotted this. You know, their websites were poor, um, and it hurt them. On the assessment side of things, that became huge, right? Because suddenly you couldn't do physical exams, you couldn't do sit down paper exams in a COVID ridden exam hall with people coughing and spluttering and so on. So you couldn't. So they actually forced like the sort of the little joke, but serious joke in the industry, in the e-assessment industry was, there was 200 years of change in a couple of months. But what ended up coming out of that, and the platform really, it helps universities manage all their exams and their processes. But one of the big benefit for students is students are learning digitally. So why do they have to then go off and do their exam handwritten? Often they've never written that much in handwriting in the previous year. So why is it they have to do it for exams? So that actually changed a lot. And what it meant was it was not just a more accessible approach to assessment, but it also helped everybody. Um, it really genuinely, it was like people were learning the way that they wanted to. So yeah, the pandemic had a massive impact on it. I think the challenge is sustaining all of that after the pandemic. And I think it wasn't for lack of enthusiasm or change of the view on this. It was just all these projects wore people out and they're very tired. So, I think now we're seeing all these projects are back on track, and they're being taken as seriously as they should be.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the Better Examinations product? Is this a way then for people to? Is it almost like a VLE at the same time, or do people have a virtual learning environment as well as the marking system of Better Examinations?
Yes, so what we do, the system does two things. It's one for the university, it helps them and makes them more efficient in managing all of their exams. So one of the big things is that you might be surprised, but a lot of universities actually manage what exams are taking place, who has signed them off, who's reviewed them, where are they, in usually typically very big Excel sheets. Um, Now that helps the universities on that side of things, but for the student and the academic, I'll come back to the academic, but for the student, it's an online platform where if the university wants to, they can run all their exams online. Now we also manage the paper process as well. But talking about the assessment side, yeah, it basically means that like they can do their exams online on there's loads of ways of doing it to maintain integrity. Like you can do them at home. You can do them in an exam hall on your own computer. You can do them in class. With that, they do it all digitally. You write your essays, type them away, multiple choice, all that sort of stuff. When you do your exams, it then all for the marking, it go for the academic, it's a lot quicker. Any questions that can be auto marked. So if there's multiple choice, they can be literally instantly marked. And then there's other things and other features to help them mark faster. So for the university, it's about efficiency. For the academic, it's about marking and giving feedback quicker. And for the student, it's just a better experience in a way that they're doing all of their assessments throughout the year anyway. So, but yes, it would clicks in with the virtual learning environments typically. We would literally out of the box, we can link it in with the learning management system. And some of these tools do have like their own quizzes and stuff, but this is just like super powered levels of features. But for the student in relation to accessibility, we built accessibility as being the core of the solution. And the whole aim was like, let's make exams a better experience for everybody. And it really works. Like, we've seen really positive feedback. People have shared stuff on social media like that. It's just takes away a lot of the old-fashioned approaches to assessment. And then also those with particular needs have all the tools that they can just have a good assessment experience. If someone has dyspraxia and they're not able to write, you have certainly large volumes of content. They'd have to have someone ascribe to. Why not just make them have the same sort of situation as everybody else? So the feedback we've been getting has been very, very positive. The challenge is a lot of this universities culturally, there's a bit of a cultural shift around this. So it takes, but certainly we also work with private exam providers, like for example, the Law Society in Ireland run all of their exams through our platform. And it's just, so you can get some organizations can move quicker than others, but I think it just brings a lot of positivity. I hope that this sounds crazy. Positivity to the assessment and exam process. But my view, maybe it's not positivity. You just don't want the trauma to be there. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to be traumatized because you had an exam experience many, many years ago.
I mean, I am that person that feels traumatized. It's one of my reoccurring nightmares of being in the old school exam hall,
Yeah,
and everyone around you, chairs squeaking, and just that pressure of having to write constantly. Like you say,
yeah,
we don't write at all now. Even when we do notes, we're typically using a tool to voice control that, or to type it onto
yeah,
a tablet of some description.
yeah.
To go from all of that to writing again it does sound quite backwards. So it's
But
great
also,
that that
James, if
tool's there.
if you think about it, getting people ready for industry or work, I mean, I, I can't like I've written a few little words on things, but I have when was the last I cannot even remember when was the last time I wrote probably more than a couple of lines of text and given it to a third party. Actually, I can't even remember, James. I remember once, probably about 15 years ago, we were putting in a tender document for a particular organization, and they needed a handwritten couple of lines summarizing our proposal. And I just thought it was the bizarrest thing ever. But yet, it's so normal for you to go into a university and go, oh, you need to handwrite all the answers. Yet you've been doing stuff on your laptop or whatever throughout the whole year. It's it's really, but I think there's a real opportunity here to make things better for everybody. And I think that's something that we're really seeing on the Better Examinations platform. Like the feedback from students and then the academics has just been so positive. It's been really nice to see stories of people just having a better situation. As you say, less stressful than being in a huge hall. Um, it's something that it's going to change. It's just a question of what pace is really the key question.
No, that's wonderful. It's great that it's sounding that it's moving forward in such a brilliant direction. I think it's great with tools like this, and now with the buzzword of AI. There's lots of more tools out there. Have you seen universities embracing different forms of AI to help improve kind of student and user experience?
I think in a couple of ways we have. I think there's a lot, there's people playing around with stuff. I think the challenge with certainly AI relative to, let's call it, engaging with the university on a 24/7 basis, right? Is, if you have a query or something like that, I think the challenge is the hallucination element of AI, is that a university can't afford at all to have an issue with an AI bot or whatever making something up, right?
Mhm.
So I think people have played around with that, or they've kept it quite limited. But look, I mean, I think the future around this is there's tons of potential, but it needs to be thought out. Um, we've seen stuff like, people using it like with sort of like as an alternative to searching their websites, finding answers, chatbots type stuff. But they have to be so careful around the hallucination element, where an AI engine can sort of feel so confident that they sort of make stuff up. The other side of it then is, yeah, we're seeing it in other areas, like actually the assessment area. We're seeing it with helping with marking. Now, I think there's pros and cons to it. I think there's certainly, our view at the moment is that it's really good for at least highlighting where an answer might be in an essay. If a marking scheme says they need to talk about these 10 things in the essay, it could highlight where those 10 things are in the essay, or where 8 of them are, or something like that. But what you don't want to do, I think, is have the engine fully mark it just yet. I don't think that's quite. Often the problem is there isn't enough data to train the engine. Like if you were doing a state exam, like the A levels, or the equivalent in other countries, the baccalaureate or something like that, you'd have high volumes of answers to be able to mark. But look, I think the future is here. I've seen people looking now at using AI to help with accessibility as well, like helping to improve the accessibility of documents automatically. To avoid the manual labor with the manual work to basically make documents accessible. So I think that's a really big area. Also seeing it with quality control, so, and reading level. We've seen that work really well. We did a little prototype ourselves around that, where in our platform we had content go through different checks, including reading level checks to help improve the content. So I think there's a lot of potential for this. I just think there's some areas where people need to be very cautious, some areas where people are using it right now, and then some areas where I think it's pretty close to being very, very helpful. Um, but it's an exciting area. Just it's you know yourself, it's everything in this whole area is moving so quickly that you know this is recorded now, and like within a week or two there's whole new things being done with AI. um,
And as soon
so
as you
yeah, I think
start
it's
to
very
dabble,
exciting.
you'll go down a rabbit hole, and then it's very hard to come back. Just because, like you say, you're trying to learn as quickly as it's being created. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I saw some really interesting stuff. We did a little based on chatting to some customers and them showing us some problems. We actually built a small proof of concept on which I presented that at a conference last year, where they had like a terrible quality um, PDF prospectus. It was in the US they called it a course catalog. It's the equivalent of a prospectus in the UK, for example, and it had terrible. It was basically a listing of all of the classes, and from it, we were able to create a little workflow where it generated content automatically, um, that was actually of a better quality than somebody having to go through a PDF, understand classes, and which options they could pick and what they could do and what couldn't do. So even things like that, there's a lot of benefits. As you say, a lot there's rabbit holes you can go down, but there are things where you can actually save yourselves a ton of time. I just hope that allows teams to do more and isn't just an excuse to resize teams because they become suddenly more efficient because there's too much work to be done to be downsizing teams, which unfortunately we're seeing in a couple of universities that have been hit, say with foreign student recruitment and things like that.
We've definitely seen the same within the local government sector over here. Um, because people think that, no, we can use AI to generate this page of content. No one's checking it. It's no quality control, no
Yeah,
accessibility control, anything like that. So I'm fully with you on that. It can definitely be something that can help us, but help, not
yeah.
take over, shall we say? There's definitely
And I
got to be
think
a
that's
balance.
it, the balance. It needs to save you time and get it right rather than actually um, try and just like automate it in such a way that no human is actually looking over it.
With kind of other systems. So you interact with quite a few third party providers, for example, payment providers and people like that, especially when it comes to course bookings and kind of at least
Yeah.
processing onto that. Personally, we find them, not specifically that side, but we find third party providers aren't as strong when it comes to the accessibility need, and therefore stops the accessibility journey. Is this something that you see yourself? And if so, is this something you believe that they will start to take on the onus of becoming accessible as well?
I think it depends on what part of an organization and what part of a university and college they touch off, right? So you're mentioning there like payments providers and so on. That another one is timetabling, and if they're dealing with a certain part of the university, and I'll say a niche part of the university, that's probably the wrong word to use, but a very specific administrative function in a university, if they're not touching off students, accessibility probably won't be up their priority list. In the US, every request for proposal that we work with looks for some commitments from our side around accessibility. Now, whether that's just questions or whether we have to provide like a VPAT questionnaire around our product, certainly on both the Terminal4 and the Better Examinations platform, that is just absolutely something that we have to do as part of the purchasing process. That is not necessarily the same in every country around the world. What I would say though, it's more of a priority for any platform that sells into a student-facing element. So it could be anything to do with learning management. It's just accessibility is probably a big thing for every person who's in teaching and learning, because even things like, for example, transcriptions of lectures, automatic transcriptions, all this sort of stuff, it's probably more in their day-to-day work cycle. But if you're sort of in a platform that's very, very niche within maybe working with just a particular administrative part of a university, you won't have this will not come up till probably too very late in a project. So that's where, as you say, like payment providers, there could be a solution around, you know, um, scholarship management or things like that, where it's probably not in the top 1 to 5 priorities in the for rolling out the project. Certainly for everything we do, it comes up every time because it's all front facing. If there's a problem with the website, a problem with the portal, that's going to be an issue. And even on the better examinations piece, it's going to be key. And anything that comes up from an accessibility point of view, we log it as a priority 1 issue so that, not everything is perfect all the time, but we'll always say, look, hey, we'll make sure we do the right thing as quickly as we can to get something right. So I think it does vary. So yeah, you're right, payments can be a challenge. It can be also where people have sort of custom built their own admissions processes. That can be a challenge. So maybe they don't have the accessibility skills in house. Now that mightn't be for stuff like UCAS, or it could be that they maybe are doing some short courses or programs and they've built their own tool to do that. That can be a problem. And as you said, like it can just be plugins as well. People have plugins. That could be a simple thing as like some sort of mapping plugin to show people where on campus something is. It could be another tool like the one I mentioned there, with plugging in and doing the sort of the 3D modeling around um, the health sciences side of things. So certainly in our area, it's absolutely comes up all the time. And certainly any groups that I'm on that talk about learning management systems, teaching and development, accessibility is always mentioned in probably every conversation. But then there's other areas of other online forums that I'm in where they're talking about probably more boring parts of the administrative process, and it never comes up at all.
Mm. Yeah, I can definitely get that one. From a definitely from a local authority point of view, we've had the similar areas.
Yeah,
Um, Plugins are quite controversial, I would say. That they offer so much wealth of content that you may not be able to put directly into your content straight away. And these little widgets do help, but it is just displayed like it's something nice rather than thinking about the full
yeah.
customer journey of where everything's gone. So,
I think the one
yeah,
thing that
it's
makes a big difference, though, is if an organization, whether public sector or university or college, if they have a member staff who maybe has additional needs around access to online content, right? Whatever that means. To there's so many different ways that people can look at the accessibility challenges that might occur on a website or a portal. But if they have a member of staff, so there's one of our clients, like you know, is completely blind and uses a screen reader. But we were able to get not just when we go through testing and things like that, but they were able to firstly look at their own journey with that hat on, but as an internal member of their team, and they were able to on a day-to-day basis um, get that message across to people as to the challenges rather than going, we did accessibility testing, it came up trumps. It's almost like because they have somebody who maybe uses a screen reader or maybe who has dyspraxia or something like that that maybe can't use a mouse or so on, they can at least make sure that it's always thought about as part of the journey right from the start, and that sort of gets embedded into the culture where other organizations won't get that. They'll just, it might be part of the project or it might not be.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's good. Um, you've gone through and spoken to many different education areas and different departments within there. Is there a sense of that they need any extra support? Is there something that you feel that the sector's screaming out for to help? This may be something you might be helping provide already, but do you find that there could be something extra that could help either the educators or the educatees being provided more accessible
I
content?
think anything to do with training is very helpful, right? The one area that I think is we've seen it work, and maybe you have as well, James, is that it's showing people examples of people navigating poorly accessible content, but in real life. When our clients have seen videos of user testing where you're showing somebody using a screen reader and you sense the frustration that they can't skip their navigation or they can't, it's just not easy or they're not sure what field relates to what, label. It's those videos, it's almost the human examples, like almost what you'd love to do, and I think would be very helpful for a lot of people, is that you have your different guidelines, but almost beside as you're doing training on a particular thing about a guideline, you're able to show some videos of people having the problem of it not being correct. And I think it's that creates that empathy to understand, oh, actually, hang on a second, oh, okay, I now understand why I need to properly tag up my table. Because I remember years ago, and something that stuck with me many, many years ago was I saw a demonstration of somebody trying to use a train timetable that had not been properly tagged up, and they just could not make heads and tails of the uh, of the train timetable. And you're like, oh my goodness, this makes total, yeah, where you're hearing like you need to properly tag up your tables properly. In this case, this was a tabular train timetable, as most of them are. And straight away, you're like, oh my goodness, I completely understand how horrific this is, and ultimately could lead them to turning up at a train station at the wrong time because they can't figure out when the train is leaving. So I think it's those little examples I think are really cool. I think, look, anything that helps with tools, um, I'd like to see more API driven tools to help with accessibility checking rather than having, people talk about headless content management, which is a term which is a little bit joked about the veterans in the industry but one, I think something that could be interesting is so almost like a headless accessibility checking, APIs to help check whether it's HTML content, PDF, do these checks, because then that will allow third-party vendors of all sorts to embed more things into the front-end interface of their product.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, the more APIs, the better. Again, more things to play with to try
Yeah.
and just help that first step before we can get it to real user testing will be perfect. So just before we go then, Pierre, I just wondered, do you use any tools yourself that you'd like to recommend for anything during your kind of day-to-day life? Is there any little bits that make things a lot easier for you to learn and to kind of progress?
Well, my needs are yeah, my needs are pretty basic. I genuinely use a lot, like some tools particularly for reading stuff out. I'm not good with reading large volumes of text, so I use it's called Natural Reader is a plugin that I
Mm.
use, and I find that really helpful. And particularly if I'm traveling, I sort of download some of the audio files of whatever I need to read. I find that really very helpful. I use a lot of like just some of the power tools within Windows, to sort of help me with like my everyday task and sort of like moving data from one thing to another. But my needs are pretty basic, but I am not good with reading large volumes of content. So I do sort of tend to like, I'm a big user, probably maybe not the tools you're looking for, but it's like I do tend to use like audio books, and I use like the Natural Reader plugins, and I find even just the dyslexia font tools that replace a font on a web page with the dyslexia font, even though I'm not diagnosed with dyslexia, although my spelling is shocking. It's like I do find it genuinely much easier to read. So look, my needs are fairly I'm fairly, they're not incredibly complicated or sophisticated, but those would be the tools that I would use. But I would be totally digital person. Like paper for me is just a burden. So everything I do is digital, and but yeah, hopefully those things are interesting. I think the one thing that's really pretty excellent at the moment is the browser extension, sort of the tools available. I think the big challenge though now, uh, um, is with the new versions of, particularly with Google Chrome, where they're locking down what these extensions can do to the web pages. Um, I think that puts some of these extensions at risk. I mean, they're saying it's to stop ad blocking, but the problem is some of these tools do replacement of stuff within the HTML DOM. And if those are blocked out, I think it's going to have a big impact on other areas that are nothing to do with protecting Google's ad revenue. So I think
Yeah,
that's a bit of a challenge around this whole tools area at the moment.
very interesting. Pierre, it's been wonderful to talk with you today. Thank you very much for your time, and wish you all the best for
Yeah,
for
always a
everything.
pleasure, James. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you.